If you have ever wondered whether one moment of honesty can change everything, this story will answer that question. There are people who carry secrets for years, not because they are bad people, but because life got complicated and telling the truth felt too dangerous, too late, or too painful. Most of those secrets stay buried forever. But on a Tuesday afternoon in a television studio in Atlanta, one man decided that enough was enough. He had hidden something for 15 years. 15 years of silence. 15 years of carrying a weight that no one around him fully understood. And on this particular day, standing under the bright studio lights of Family Feud, with Steve Harvey just a few feet away and a live audience watching, Marcus Webb finally chose to speak. What came out of his mouth left Steve Harvey completely speechless. It moved the audience to tears. And when the clip aired, it reminded millions of viewers across America that truth, even hard truth, has a power that no amount of silence ever will. This is the story of Marcus Webb, a man, a secret, and the moment that changed his life forever. Like and subscribe now, because by the end of this story, you will understand exactly why this moment became one of the most talked about episodes in Family Feud history. Marcus Webb was 47 years old. He was the kind of man that most people would describe as solid, dependable, the type who showed up early, stayed late, and never made a fuss. He worked as a high school history teacher in Columbus, Ohio, a job he had held for 19 years. His students loved him because he had a way of making the past feel personal. He did not just teach dates and events. He taught lessons. He always told his students that history only mattered if you were honest about it. The irony of that, of course, was not lost on Marcus himself. He had been married to his wife, Diane, for 22 years. They had 2 kids, a daughter named Keisha, who was studying nursing at Ohio State, and a son named Jerome, who was 16 and already talking about following his father into teaching. By every outward measure, the Webb family was exactly the kind of family that America celebrates. Hardworking, faith-rooted, close. The Family Feud appearance had been Diane's idea. She had entered them in a contest 2 years earlier as a birthday surprise for Marcus, and when the producers called and said the Webb family had been selected, the whole household erupted in excitement. Marcus's mother, his brother Calvin, Diane's sister Rochelle, and Jerome all came together to form the team. Keisha flew home from Columbus just for the taping. On the surface, everything looked perfect, but Marcus had been carrying something since he was 32 years old. Something that began with a single decision made in a moment of fear, a decision that had never been reversed, never been confessed, and never been forgotten. Not for a single day. The secret was not dramatic in the way that tabloid secrets often are. There were no scandals, no crimes, no hidden families. It was quieter than that, and in some ways that made it heavier, because it was the kind of thing that could have been fixed years ago if only Marcus had found the courage to speak. Instead, he had let time pass, and with every passing year, the silence had grown thicker and harder to break. What no one in that studio audience knew, what even Diane did not fully know, was that Marcus had spent the night before the taping wide awake, sitting at the kitchen table, asking himself whether this was finally the moment. The Webb family performed brilliantly in the main game. Jerome was quick on the buzzer, Calvin had a natural showmanship that got the audience cheering, and Diane's instincts were so good that at one point Steve Harvey turned to the audience and said, half joking, that she might be the smartest person in the building. The Webbs pulled ahead in the final round and won the main game with a comfortable margin. Then it was time for fast money. Marcus and Diane exchanged a look. They had practiced at home, drilling common survey answers at the kitchen table. Marcus had volunteered to go first. He stepped up to the podium, straightened his jacket, and took a breath. Steve Harvey walked over to him with that easy confidence that had made him one of television's most beloved hosts. He looked at Marcus for a moment and then gave him a slow nod, the kind that said, "I see you, brother, take your time." Marcus scored well, not perfectly, but well, 142 points. The audience applauded. Steve pumped his fist. Now Diane just needed 58 more points to win the $20,000. Diane stepped up. She was sharp and steady, moving through the 5 questions with quiet focus. When the last answer was revealed and the board lit up number 1, the studio exploded. The Webbs had done it. $20,000, a perfect finish. But then something happened that no one in the production team had planned for. Instead of celebrating, Marcus went still. He stood off to the side of the stage, his hands clasped in front of him, his face carrying an expression that was impossible to read. The audience was cheering, his family was hugging, Jerome was jumping, and Marcus Webb was standing completely alone in his own silence. Steve Harvey noticed. In all his years of hosting, Steve had developed a particular sensitivity to the human moments that television rarely captured on purpose. He could tell the difference between someone who was overwhelmed by joy and someone who was overwhelmed by something else entirely. He walked over to Marcus slowly, placed a hand on his shoulder, and leaned in. "Marcus, you good?" he asked quietly. Marcus looked up. His jaw was tight. His eyes were bright, not with happiness, but with something older and deeper than that. He swallowed once. Then he said, "Mr. Harvey, I need to say something, if that's okay. I need to say something I should have said a long time ago." The cheering around them began to fade as people started to sense a shift in the air. Steve turned slightly toward the cameras and gave a small nod to the producers. Then he turned back to Marcus. "Talk to me," he said. The studio went quiet in a way that studios rarely do. Marcus took a breath that was slow and deliberate, the kind a person takes before lifting something heavy. 15 years ago, he began, his voice steady but stripped of its usual ease. "I made a mistake. A real one. And I never told the people who deserved to know." He looked at Diane. She had stopped smiling. She was watching him with a careful, still expression, the look of a woman who had sensed for years that something was being held back but had never pressed hard enough to make it come forward. When Jerome was 2 years old, Marcus continued, "I lost my job. Not because the school closed or because of budget cuts. I was let go because I had falsified some paperwork, nothing criminal. I was behind on my certification renewal, and instead of just telling the truth about it, I panicked and filled in dates that were not accurate. When they found out I was terminated." He paused. His hands were trembling slightly, but his voice did not waver. "I never told Diane the real reason. I told her the school had budget problems. She believed me. She went back to work full-time while I spent 6 months looking for a new position. She supported this family without knowing what had actually happened. And when I got my new job and we moved forward, I let it stay buried. I told myself it did not matter anymore. I told myself I had changed, that the lesson had been learned." He turned to look at his son Jerome directly. "But last week, Jerome came to me and said he wanted to be a teacher. And he said he wanted to be honest like me. An honest man, he called me, and I have been sitting with that ever since. Because the one person I most needed to tell, the woman who stood by me through everything, she has spent 22 years married to someone carrying a lie she did not know about." The audience was completely silent. Diane's hand had moved to cover her mouth. Steve Harvey, who had hosted this show through thousands of moments of human drama, was standing very still. His usual playful energy had given way to something much more serious and much more tender. He looked at Marcus with an expression that was simply present. No performance, no showmanship, just a man paying attention to another man telling the truth. Marcus faced Diane directly now. His voice cracked for the first time. "Diane, I am sorry. I should have told you 15 years ago. You deserve to know. You have always deserved better than what I gave you in that moment, and I am sorry it took me this long to say it out loud." Diane was crying. Not dramatically, quietly, the way people cry when something long-held finally releases. She crossed the stage without a word, and Marcus met her halfway. They held each other for a long moment while the audience watched in the kind of respectful silence that you do not often hear on television. Steve Harvey stood to the side, giving them that moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and measured. He said, "I have been standing here for a minute trying to figure out what to say, and the truth is I do not think I need to say much, because what just happened here is bigger than this show. A man just looked at his family on national television and chose truth over comfort. That is not a small thing. That is one of the hardest things a human being can do." He paused. "And Diane, I do not know you personally. But the fact that your first move was to walk across that stage says everything about the kind of woman you are." The audience erupted. The Webbs took their $20,000 and went home, but the story did not end there. It did not end there by a long way. When the episode aired 6 weeks later, the clip of Marcus's confession spread across social media within hours. It was not the perfect game score that people shared. It was the moment at the podium, the shake in Marcus's hands, the steadiness in his voice, the way Diane crossed the stage. Within 48 hours, the clip had been viewed over 12 million times. The comments told their own story. Thousands of people wrote about their own hidden truths, things they had carried for years that they had never found the courage to say. Veterans wrote about guilt they had buried. Parents wrote about mistakes they had made in raising their children and never admitted to. Married couples wrote that watching Marcus had prompted a conversation in their own home that was long overdue. A pastor in Birmingham shared the clip with his congregation and said it was the most honest thing he had seen on television in 20 years. Steve Harvey addressed the moment on his talk show the following week. He said that in over 30 years in entertainment, he had been part of many memorable moments, but very few had stayed with him the way Marcus Webb's confession had. That man did not just tell his wife the truth. He modeled something for his son. He showed Jerome what an honest man actually looks like, not someone who never makes mistakes, but someone who eventually faces them. The Webb family agreed to a follow-up interview 3 months after the episode aired. Diane spoke openly. She said that the week after the taping, before the show even aired, she and Marcus had the longest conversation of their marriage. She said it was not easy. There was anger. There were tears. There were several nights when the road forward felt uncertain. But she also said this: "I always knew something was off about that story he told me. I think I chose not to look too hard because I was afraid of what I would find." Watching him say it out loud to me, to our kids, to the whole country, I realized that was his way of finally trusting me with the truth. And I chose to trust that the man standing in front of me was the man I had always believed him to be. Jerome, who was 16 at the time of the taping, gave a short statement that his parents shared with permission. He wrote, "I called my dad an honest man and I meant it, not because he never messed up, because he fixed it. That is what I want to be." Marcus returned to teaching that fall. Several of his colleagues had seen the episode, and more than a few of them stopped by his classroom to quietly say that they respected what he had done. One of his senior colleagues, a woman who had taught at the school for 31 years, knocked on his door one afternoon and simply said, "It takes more courage to tell the truth late than never. Do not forget that." He kept those words. He wrote them on a piece of paper and put it in his desk drawer, where he still keeps it today. The $20,000 went toward Keisha's final year of nursing school tuition. Marcus and Diane took Jerome to Washington, D.C. for a long weekend, his first time visiting the National Museums. Standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial, Marcus told his son what Lincoln had once said about the necessity of facing difficult truths, even when the cost is high. Jerome listened without saying anything. Then he put his arm around his father's shoulder. That image, a father and his teenage son standing in front of Lincoln, not saying a word, was something Diane photographed without them noticing. It became the most treasured photo in the Webb family home. 1 year after the episode, Marcus was invited to speak at a teachers' conference in Cleveland on the subject of integrity in education. He did not give a polished keynote. He simply told his story. He talked about the falsified paperwork, the termination, the lie he had told his wife, and the 15 years of silence. He talked about Jerome calling him an honest man. And he talked about the moment on the Family Feud stage when he finally understood that the only way to become the man his son believed him to be was to start telling the truth completely and out loud. The room was silent throughout. When he finished, the audience rose. Several teachers approached him afterward and privately told him things they had never said to anyone. One man said he had made a similar mistake early in his career and had carried it quietly for 11 years. Another woman said she had been afraid to correct a misunderstanding with her principal for 6 years, and that listening to Marcus had convinced her to do it the following week. Marcus told each of them the same thing: the longer you wait, the heavier it gets. But it is never too late to put it down. Steve Harvey and Marcus Webb stayed in contact after the show. On the anniversary of the episode's airing, Steve sent a short message that Marcus has shared publicly only once. It read, "Brother, you reminded me that this platform is not about entertainment. It is about people. Thank you for trusting it with something real." The Webb family's story has since been referenced in discussions about honesty in relationships, integrity in the workplace, and the unexpected ways that truth-telling can create connection rather than destruction. Marriage counselors have cited the episode as an example of what vulnerability actually looks like when it is not curated or performed, just honest. Diane has spoken about forgiveness in a way that is grounded and real. She has said publicly, "Forgiveness is not a feeling you have once. It is a choice you make over and over. I still make it. And every time I do, I feel more free." 3 years after the taping, the Webbs celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. For the first time in a long time, Marcus said, it was a completely clean celebration. No weight. No buried thing sitting in the corner of the room. Just 25 years, 2 kids, and a marriage that had been tested and had held. He had gone on Family Feud to win money for his family. He had done that. But what he had really won, what Diane had won, what Jerome had won, what their whole family had won, was something much harder to put a price on. The truth, finally spoken, finally free. And that, as Steve Harvey would later say, is the real jackpot. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another one. These are the moments that remind us what really matters. We will see you in the next one.